everybody. Thank you so much for joining us again. I'm with Rachel Hoyle again from Nucleotide Nutrition. Welcome to the second episode in this amazing mad dash through nucleotide nutrition. Today, we're actually looking at sources of nucleotides. So Rachel, welcome and thank you so much for being with me again.
Pleased to be back.
Okay, lovely. Well, look, let's dash straight in because this is such a fascinating topic. When we spoke previously, you described the mind-boggling demand for new cells and nucleotides. How does the human body actually obtain all of those vast, ridiculously huge numbers of nucleotides that are just crucial for every single function of the human body?
Yeah, well, it's really lucky. The body has a few different ways of getting its nucleotides that it needs. The first way, the main way, is a de novo process. So that's the body's own way of building the nucleotides from first principles, all the different chemicals that are involved in making the nucleic acids, or not the nucleic acids, but the actual nucleotides, which is they need to make the nucleobase, and they need to make the phosphate group that goes with it, and also a sugar entity, which is ribose or deoxyribose. So all the chemicals involved in those parts of the nucleotide, the body finds and builds its own, and a lot of that is done in the liver. The second way is a salvage process. So you imagine all those dying cells we talked about in the first video. Well, the body scavenges those dying cells and finds all these entities to build the nucleotides and scavenge and make and find nucleotides from the dying cells. So, and then the third way is actually from food. So none of us really have thought, or a lot of us haven't thought until we start getting involved in the whole science of nucleotides and the body, that actually the body needs, and certain cells in the body need to get nucleotides from food. Now, the types of foods that we eat will deliver different quantities, and we can talk about that, and we'll go into that in more detail later on. And obviously part of the dietary source could be supplementation, and obviously that's nucleotide nutrition's business.
Yes, of course. Rachel, may I ask you, so what types of cells need dietary nucleotides?
Okay, well, these are the cells that generally are short-lived. So where there is a sudden rapid requirement. So we're looking at things like the immune system. Now, obviously, if this is an infection, the body needs to ramp up its production of white blood cells, bone marrow cells, killer cells, macrophages, all these various immune cells. They can't get enough nucleotides to go through that replication process and build a new DNA. So they need to get extra, and they get it from the diet. So there's the immune cells. Then the other, and probably the first requirement, is in the gut. The gut lining cells need to get nucleotides from dietary sources, as well as the things like bifidobacteria, the microbiome, also draw on nucleotides that are delivered in from the food. The other cells I haven't mentioned are red blood cells. They're part of the bone marrow. The bone marrow cells need to have nucleotides from the diet. So those are the main ones. They tend to be fairly short-lived cells.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense actually. So can you describe how the process, I guess you would say, of how nucleotides in our food are actually made available?
Yeah. So if you imagine the food and it's all the cells, what the body is needing is the nucleoproteins to break down, and those are protected actually. So the body has enzymes that break down those nucleoproteins, and then that releases them into smaller parts, and then you get a succession of different types of enzymes that break it down. This is the digestion process. until finally they're broken down into the final nucleotides. And that is a fairly inefficient process. It's only 10 to 15% efficient. But depending on the foods and the content of nucleotides and nucleoproteins coming in with the food, and we'll go into the different sorts of foods and which have the highest amounts. But that process is what digestion's all about. And the aim is to deliver the nucleotide so it can be absorbed and taken up by the different cells that require them. Now, the less protected the nucleotides, the quicker the process will be that it can be delivered to the gut and be absorbed and used. And so this is why supplementation with purified nucleotides is very efficient. So you're looking at up to a 90% efficiency in terms of being absorbed through the gut. So you know, if there is a deficiency, this is where supplementing with a purified nucleotide would quicken the process and support those short-lived cells that are needing a rapid expansion. So,
right, okay. And I understand that it's quite important if you are supplementing, and I'm sure you'll probably come on to this in a bit, but I understand it's quite important if you are supplementing to also make sure that you have zinc available, or adequate levels of zinc available. Can you expand on that a little?
Yeah, well, zinc is very much involved in the digestion process and the formation of different cells. And part of the metabolism of nucleotides involves zinc. And if the body, actually, there are certain people with genetic issues who have problems metabolizing and using zinc. So it's a very important mineral involved in the whole process. It's quite a complicated process, but yeah, zinc is a critical mineral to have.
And I believe it affects the production of HCl, hydrochloric acid.
Yes.
And obviously that would affect protein breakdown, wouldn't it? Which would then, I know you're coming on to that, but I'm actually just thinking about, you know, the way that proteins are released, you know, as a result of HC, you know, the interaction.
Yeah, I mean, protein synthesis is very complicated and involves a lot of different molecules. And if there's any sort of shortage of any of them, it holds the whole process up. It's so important that you have available to the body the various pools of all these different chemicals and minerals and nucleotides and that. So all the processes like protein synthesis, and proteins are everywhere. I mean, a hormone is a protein. So I mean, there's so many things that are connected to protein synthesis. So if you have any hold up because there's a shortage and the body can't digest, and as you say, in terms of HCl, it just makes everything so inefficient, and that's where you get breakdown of the body and health. So absolutely crucial. I mean, nucleotides are not the only important, you know, they're all important because they all rely on each other.
Yes.
Or these different types of nutrients to work effectively. And if there's a shortage in one area, it will have an effect on everything else.
Yes. I think I remember you saying when we spoke previously that if you have an imbalance of, let's say, HCl or anything else that would contribute to adequate levels of HCl, that can reduce the availability for absorption of nucleotides to about 5 to 15%. But yet, if you supplement correctly, that can actually increase to the availability is up to 80%. Is that?
Yes, that's right. I mean, if you make it easier for the body and the digestive process, particularly if it's somebody's got a digestive process that isn't working very well, and there's all sorts of reasons why that might be, then by providing something which is more purified, you're going to get much more chance and more efficiency. Yeah.
Yes, makes a lot of sense. It really does.
Yeah.
So would you say overall that this is why supplementation with a balanced level of purified nucleotides is so incredibly effective?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are, as I mentioned in the first session, the 5 main nucleotides. They vary in their deficiency in the body. But if you have a shortage of one nucleotide, then, so you can't see my finger, one nucleotide, then what it means is that the DNA or the RNA will take longer to be made. So it slows down the whole process. So when you're designing a product, which is what we do in nucleotides, you need to make sure that you're supplying the nucleotides that the body needs more than, say, the others. So, for instance, the purine type are quite plentiful in food, but the pyrimidines are short. So, it's important that you understand that a nucleotide isn't the same. There are differences, and we have to make sure that we cater for each type of nucleotide.
Yes, that's really interesting. So essentially you could have a good level of one, and yet it's going to basically sit there doing nothing while it's sort of waiting for the rest of its friends.
It's waiting for its partner to partner up with.
Yes, I see. That's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think what we'll do is we'll leave it here for this particular session, because the next session coming up is really fascinating as well. It's the low nucleotide content of the modern diet. We all know that the standard American diet, or the food pyramid and so on, is very, very inadequate, woefully so.
Yeah.
So we'll rejoin. We'll leave everybody here at the moment, but please, everybody, do rejoin us for this next session coming up, because it is really, really fascinating. We'll take a deep dive into the modern diet and why it's just not working for us on a genetic level. So yes, we'll see you there. And of course, as always, please feel free, if you have any questions, please just make contact with Rachel. Details are below the video. See you in a sec.